Hi everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave. It's Jem here. As per your request, here is the rematch of the Scrawlrbox prompt for Imaginarium. This is kind of a weird video for me to film because I've talked about the content of the actual picture already and I was kind of struggling on what to talk about, so I'm going to kind of mention the things that I've changed compared to the original, which was kind of like a 3-marker challenge. So I stuck quite rigidly here to the original sketch, and this is on A3 paper, and I did it on A3 paper just because I wanted to put in a lot more detail than was physically possible on the A5 sheet. I did want to try and keep the feel of the original drawing, and I went for more of the illustrative style, you know, with the fine liner outlines, that kind of thing. So I wanted to keep that aspect of it, but I knew that doing it in marker was just not the way forward. I'd already done it in marker, and to get a full range of colours, which was basically what I felt was lacking from doing the actual Scrawlrchallenge, I decided that I was going to do this in coloured pencil. So when it came to the sketching part, the main thing that I had to really take my time with was these little pencil fence posts. I am not good at repetitive type stuff, and I kind of struggled with the proportions a little bit, especially the ones at the back that had to be, you know, a little bit further off in the distance. So that was definitely the most challenging part of the sketching process for me, I feel. So up at the top there, you can just see it's just out of shot there, but above my paintbrush tree foresty type bit, I stuck in a tower because, let's face it, who doesn't like a mysterious, mystical, medieval tower? No? Just me? No? Okay, fair enough. I had a lot of fun with the candle mountains here, and again, it's something I just felt as if I didn't really have enough room for in the original drawing. So I had a lot of fun trying to decide on heights and how they were going to overlap and making sure that some were going to be off in the distance. I also added in this little, I want to call it a resting area, and it's kind of like a path from a cave that goes into the candles, a candle cave, out to this little clearing in this meadow where it's just a really serene place to chill out. And generally, on the good side of my mind, I feel that, you know, especially when I do things like yoga or meditate, it is a very calm and pleasant place to be. And when I envisage that as a physical place, this is the kind of place that kind of like, you know, comes into my head, and I find it very calming and very peaceful. So I thought it was good to include that because I had the space in this bigger drawing to fit it in, you know, that I wasn't trying to squeeze everything in, which was really nice. Aside from that, there was just little details, like I put a couple of vines hanging down there, that's what I was just drawing. And it's just nice to add in these little things and just sort of step up the drawing a little bit, because I do feel that when we do things like Scrawlrchallenges, and I say we, I mean the royal we, I tend to simplify things, and it's really to make life easier for myself because of a limited colour palette or a certain medium or, you know, size of paper, that kind of thing. So I really wanted to go to town and push those boundaries because I didn't have that excuse, and I had this gigantic sheet of paper to work with, which was quite exciting. So when I flipped over to the other side, this was the side that I had to put a bit more thought into as well. And I took a bit more time to plan because when I did it the first time round, there was a lot of parts of it that just didn't really make sense, or I hadn't really construed them the way I would have liked to. So I spent a bit more time planning in my sketchbook before drawing this top part again, and really made it more detailed and tried to make it feel a bit more sort of foreboding and sinister. And obviously the colour palette that you use for that is a big help with things like that, but I wanted to really pin that down at the sketching stage and not have to rely on a colour palette to convey a feeling or an atmosphere. So another thing that I added in here was this. I had like a dark patch in the original drawing and I hadn't really decided what it was. So I decided to make this a lake of blood with a knife in it. And I put some path round about it, which will explain a bit more when we got into the colouring. This stage was just really the outlining. I did use 3 different widths of fine liner, and that was to help with depth perception. So in the things that were furthest away, I used a really fine, and that was the 003 Pigma Micron liner. And for the details that were in the foreground, I used a 03 to, you can see the chunky lines there on the paintbrush trees, and that's quite a good sort of example of what I'm talking about. But being able to mix up those line widths really helped me push things into the background and pull things forward and make the things stand out that I wanted to be noticed first. I did swither a little bit here about how to join up my fence, and I went with this thick black line, and I really did it because I wanted to show that feeling of safety, that area is enclosed and that nothing would be able to come in. And short of putting something ridiculous like a barbed wire fence, which obviously I wouldn't do because that is the calm and serene and happy and bright side of the Imaginarium. But I felt that the thick black line was enough to convey that is quite a solid fence without taking away from the joy and happy aspect of the picture. So really, there's not much else to talk about here. I'm just basically outlining everything. It's something that I do struggle with because it's not something I tend to do an awful lot of. I've very rarely drawn an illustrative style, and when I do, especially using pencil, I rarely use a fine liner because I have an old hand injury. I don't have the steadiest of hands, but it is good to practice this kind of thing. So I kind of looked at this as an exercise in that to, try and help me improve. For the things that were furthest in the background, I used that teeny weeny tiny skinny fine liner, and I used like broken lines to portray the fact that it's pushed its way out in the distance. And I really only used it on the candles, so you can have a peek at that the next time I turn it back round. You'll see what I'm talking about, and it's a really effective way to show something like that. I also use that technique a lot when I'm drawing glass items like bottles, and you can get that sort of half feeling in. So now we're down to the nitty gritty, we're into coloured pencils. I used my Faber-Castell Polychromos, they are my favourite pencils, and I feel as if I don't use them often enough. So they felt like a comfortable and obvious choice for me doing this, especially with the paper I was working on. And it's just like standard A3 cartridge paper, it's nothing fancy, and it's quite good though. It's got a bit of tooth in it, so it takes quite a few layers of coloured pencil. So you can see here I've got the reflection from the setting sun, and that's obviously bouncing off our not creepy but quite cool medieval tower here, and also the sides of some of the paintbrush trees. So when I was doing the bristles here, I just wanted to use a mixture of different colours to get some depth and texture so that it was very obvious that they were the tips of paintbrushes and not just funny shaped trees. I know the paint kind of gives it away, but yeah, you know what I mean. It's quite important to me to get that level of detail in. I did leave the paint on the trees until I'd finished that whole top section, and I just wanted to see how the colour balance was going to look once I'd coloured everything else in, and then pick out some really bright colours that would really pop out and stand out from the rest of the picture. I had the best fun colouring this picture, and I'm not going to lie, I haven't done something in this style for such a long time. And I don't often colour my own artwork in just in coloured pencil, the way I would like a colouring page. So I had really good fun with this. And I particularly enjoyed doing the trees just because they're fun, and I like to do trees anyway. I like to paint trees as well. But just that sort of joy of making things the colours that I wanted to make them, knowing that the original idea had come out of my own head, again, opposed to working in a colouring book by another artist. There was something really nice about that, and this took me so many hours. Like I really underestimated how long it would take me, because I'm thinking, I'm just redrawing this, I've done it before, it's not going to be that difficult. Man, I was wrong. I sat and worked it out. I did film every single part, like every single pencil stroke was filmed, so I ended up with 32 half-hour videos and then had to cut that down. So there you go. If you divide 32 by 2, that's how many hours I sat doing this. I was like, I'm usually pretty good with my time management and, realistic deadlines and things, but that was certainly not the case with this. But I enjoyed every single second of it, which I really wasn't expecting to. I thought it might start to feel like a bit of a chore, but surprisingly not. So here I was paying quite careful attention to the light source, which is obviously the setting sun, and I was trying to add in as many details in terms of shadows and light as possible with the coloured pencil. And personally, I feel I've done a really good job of that with the greenery, and I think I've kind of like tripped up on a couple of areas like the candles and so on and so forth, but it's not really taken away from my satisfaction of what I've produced here. which is unusual for me because I'm usually quite hard on myself. So I don't know, it's interesting that I've not been as critical of myself this time round, but I think it's just the fact that I enjoyed myself that much. And, I kind of thought to myself, see, even if this turns out terribly, I had so much fun doing it. Who cares if it turned out really bad? But thankfully, for once in my entire life, I was very happy with the outcome. Doing these candle flames as well, that was so much fun. And again, I was trying to get the ones that were further away, I wanted them a bit paler, so they were off in the distance, and then the ones at the front were quite vibrant. And even just sitting figuring that out and working on that in pencil, it's like stuff like that makes me really happy. And look at those little bushes, they're so cute. This was quite a hard part for me in terms of the coloured pencil side of things. And that was capturing the colour of Jack Daniels, taking into account the light source and the fact that I had to still kind of make it look like a river stroke waterfall stroke tidal wave, which you see obviously further on down here. So I used quite a mix of pencils. I ended up using about 6 or 7 pencils, and there is actually indigo in there as well. And it was just to get a little bit of depth, in some of the sort of flowing lines, as it were, just to give it a little bit of movement. So I spent quite a lot of time going back over the same areas with different pencils just to try and make sure there was some sort of depth to it and it just didn't look like one big wiggly line. Onto the sunset, one of my favourite things to do in pencil as well. This is the only area of the drawing where I didn't exclusively use pencil. I decided after I'd put these lovely colours in, which were just so much fun, and they just turned out really nice because I like things like that. I did eventually decide to use a blending medium, so it was Zest It blender that I used, which is primarily a UK product. It smells of oranges, it's lovely, and it's the same as Gamsol and these types of things. I do have it in a Copic marker, and that was a trick I learned from Erin Jarboe, who has the Simple Art for Adults YouTube channel. You can check her out, I'll leave that link in the description for you. And I just felt that there was quite a lot of texture and things going on in the foreground, and I thought that it would look a lot better if that was just nice and smoothed out. So that was kind of my reasoning behind it. And I don't normally use blending solutions because one of the reasons that I like coloured pencil is I like the texture you get from the pencil, and I don't really want to like soften that out. I want that texture there. But I think it just kind of added to the sort of serenity of the picture. And I don't know, it's just one of those things. I only do it every now and then, but it helped to sort of smoosh my colours out together as well, above the sunset. I did kind of toy with the idea of taking the sky all the way up, but I thought if I did that, it would take away from the feeling of the picture, because I really feel like the core of the picture is the section where the waterfall comes down over the edge. It's not the focal point, but I just feel it's like the centre of the picture. So I decided against taking the sky all the way up. And I don't know whether that was a good decision or not, but I did it anyway. So you can see here, now that I've finished the top half of the picture, I've gone back and picked some really ridiculous bright colours for the paint. Again, I wanted it to be really obvious that it was paint and not like a bird had pooped on the top of the paintbrush trees. Yeah. Anyway, and it's just like adding fun to the picture, because I really did want this to be a fun picture, because I was having fun. It was fun the first time round, and it was just as fun the second time as well. So here we go. When it came to colouring in my little pencil fence post, I decided to go rainbow colours because why not? One of my favourite things is to see all the colours together. I really enjoy that, and I get quite excited, as you guys mostly already know. I get really excited about colour, so it seemed fitting that I should have little rainbow fence posts, and they actually turned out okay. They're by no means perfect, I'm perfectly aware of that, but I was quite pleased with them, and I think they look quite cute, and I think I've managed enough for the perspective so that you can see that they're disappearing off into the distance. So here we go, this is the label on the Jack Daniels bottle. Now, if I know anything, it's the label on a Jack Daniels bottle, and I did actually toy with the idea of recreating the label in its entirety properly. I then slapped myself around the face and told myself to get real, had a word with myself in the corner, because that would have taken me forever. So I just kind of went for this like detached black and white type pattern, because if you look at it from a distance, it does look like the label, and that's more than enough to be getting on with. It's way too much detail. It wasn't even so much the level of detail, it was the time I would have had to put in to put that detail in. And I was already racking up the hours at this point, so I decided to give that a buy. and just go with this sort of representation of the label. So you can see there I was just kind of like trying to richen up some of the colours in my waterfall there, and then onto this little book page, which also I think turned out quite well. I'm quite pleased with it. I keep saying that about this drawing, but I'm just quite pleased with this drawing, full stop. I like books though, and I like old books, and I wanted to get that kind of old book feel, and again I feel as if I did enough to capture that in this instance. Maybe? Yeah, okay. I could maybe have put some more pages in. That might have been something that I could have spent a little bit more time on perhaps. But I didn't want to overdo it because it's not like there is no sort of main focal point of this picture because it's double-sided or double-ended or whatever you want to call it. So I wanted each of the details to be there, but I didn't want them to be standing out on their own. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I was pondering what to do at this point. You can see there's like a pause here where I've not really done anything. And it's because I was trying to figure out where I was going to go next and what I was going to do. There was a lot of that as well. But again, it's not something that I anticipated because I'd gone through this process of, well, I've already drawn this, so it shouldn't, I shouldn't be spending time doing that. And I spent a lot of time. And I think it was just the fact that I was being so careful about what I was doing because I wanted it to be, well, as perfect as possible, or, I just wanted it to be really good. So then we're moving on to this like core, I called it the core soil, the earth that splits the two sides of the Imaginarium. And this was the part that took me the longest. It was very, very tedious. And it was just repeating the same thing over and over. It was a layer of pencil down, put in some cracks and splits, and then go back over with another layer of pencil. But it was actually quite a large section to cover because it goes across the middle of the entire piece. So that took a lot of doing, and I watched a lot of YouTube while I was filling that in. I tried to get like a sort of gradient between the top half and the bottom half because I wanted the earth to be a lot darker. And again, it's going back to that idea of creating an atmosphere with your colour palette. So I figured that the ground would just be a lot muddier and a lot darker because that's kind of more sinister. So it didn't need to be like a perfect gradient. I did want there to be the contrast between the two so you could see that there was a definite change, but I didn't want to have like literally draw a line across the middle. So I tried to blend them together and I think it's turned out okay. I could maybe have spent a little bit more time on that and have done a slightly better job. But again, it was kind of a case of deciding where I was going to spend my time and what I was going to put my energy into. And I think I put enough into it. I might have lost my marbles if I'd put any more detail or time or effort into that. I really am quite an impatient person. So over to the dark side of the Imaginarium, and again, I wanted to keep the feel of the original Scrawlrchallenge piece, and I'd put in the sky with like black fine liner just in like lines and then graduated it out. So I kept the sky really simple. I just used Payne's Grey for the sky and decided to put a little bit more detail into the clouds here. And again, it was to try and get that feeling of the sort of impending doom kind of idea that would set you slightly on edge. And I tried to make this come across as being a little bit more serious. I just felt, I did want it to have that sort of illustrative feel, so it was always going to be slightly cartoony anyway. But I just want people to look at this side and get that slight feeling of unease, or the feeling that, okay, this doesn't look like a place that you'd maybe want to spend any time in. I also spent time making a little bit more effort with the eyes on all the mountains, because one of the things that I wanted to portray was the fact that someone's judging you or watching you all the time. And you can see there's a little scraggy mountain who's bent over the grave there, and he's actually looking into the grave. That was fully intentional. It's as if he's like pointing the little dude to say that, that there's your bed there, just come and get in it. So here's the two paths. So the little guy that's getting overwhelmed by the Jack Daniels like tidal wave, he has a choice to take two paths. He can either go into the freaky deaky, spooky, angry cave in the mountain, or he can go and climb into his grave. And I think that kind of represents how we feel sometimes when we are overwhelmed by things, or we're maybe having a hard time with mental health. Certainly that's the way I feel, and I hope that that resonates with some people. So although this is a really cheery and fun take on this prompt, it's actually got quite a serious message to it as well, which I'm not usually that deep when I'm doing stuff like this. Let's be truthful, but it's just kind of what came out, to be honest. It's just, I don't know, I worry sometimes, I really do. So yeah, I don't really have much more to say about this side of things. I was just trying to get that feeling in of foreboding and having a little bit of shadow in without the top, like without the entire part of the drawing being really dark and black and kind of like muddy and smudgy looking. So I found that quite hard to balance. And by the time I got to the Jack Daniels on this side, I was kind of well versed in what I was doing, and it didn't take me long to get the colour down here. I did make it bolder because again, it kind of like dominates that part of the image, and I wanted that to be quite apparent and really pull it into the foreground without actually outlining it. So just added a few finishing touches here, and that is more or less it, guys. I would love to know what you think, and I really hope that you enjoy this. As I say, it was a long slog, it really was. Please feel free to leave me a comment and tell me what you think. And I just want to say thanks very much for hanging out with me. Thank you for being patient when I didn't put a video out on Thursday as well. I really appreciate that. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. I hope you've enjoyed this, and we shall see you back in the cave on Tuesday, I promise, for another video. Have a great day, everyone. Please stay safe, and we shall see you soon. Bye for now.